Hi. Hi, Simone. Hi, Jesse.
Right.
We're just here in the theater at Head House, and we really loved your films. We just watched them. So we have a lot of audience members formulating questions for you. Thanks so much for joining us for the Q&A. And I wanted to kick off with just a couple questions as people kind of formulate their thoughts. Both of your films seem to explore the construction of the animal and the construction of the digital in parallel. And I was just wondering if you could share thoughts about what kind of you see as the connection between the animal and the digital, or the animal and the technological, particularly in these works. I don't know if one of you feels like starting. Also, just a sidebar, if you notice me looking over my shoulder, it's just to look at your face. So we have some uncanny choreography here.
Do you want to start, Jesse?
If you have something right away, go for it.
I guess actually my kind of like main interest since quite a long time has been photography, I guess, in the wider sense, and not so much producing photography, but kind of like thinking with photography and kind of looking at how we see the world and everything around us with photography rather than through it. And when I did when I did commerce, which is a few years ago now, it came from this thing that every time I went to visit my family in the countryside, I would drive by the coastline and I would see this bird, and they do this pose. They do this kind of crucifix-like pose where they sit, and if the water is still, then the mirror and the water surface, and it looks like really, it just looks like an image. You're in reality, but it looks so much just like an image, and it's so obviously posing, and it kind of points to the beginnings of Western culture as it is, I guess. But I also thought that there was something like really weirdly both ancient, but also something that made me think about analog photography with this bird. And of course, that's just because you see what you think about, and so I started kind of like asking questions about it. I realized that it was like this particularly kind of ancient bird, that it's been around for a very, very long time. And I thought that it was interesting that I would kind of project all these things that had to do with kind of modern image making onto this bird that kind of like was not only older than me, but also older than the image of Jesus on the cross and everything that kind of like that I kind of associated with it. So I had kind of like this thing that Borges, I think, describes somewhere where he describes this moment where we look at literature, ancient literature, and start seeing it as being Kafkaesque, even though, of course, Kafka then is much later. That kind of like thing, and that's what I started then tripping on, kind of like thinking about like what can this animal then tell me about the development of like image technologies and etc. I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also been, a few years since I made this film. But I know that for me, sound design is a very important part of my process and my practice. And the title of the film, "See a Dog, Hear a Dog," is a sort of unattributed maxim about how well sound design works. That you can really, the audience is expecting to hear what they see, and there is so much kind of diversion tactics or strategies in sound design with the kind of creating this world and making it feel lived in and making it feel believable. And there's a lot of manipulation, even in nonfiction forms. And so I think I started off just kind of like riffing on the title as a phrase that inspired me to think about connections and kind of cinematic trust relationships in terms of believing what you see. And that kind of led into thinking about the relationships we have with images and mostly the vessels in which we encounter them, which is, I would say, all kinds of computers from our phones to laptop to whatever. and thinking about the kind of relationships that occur through these mechanisms that can be fictitious or can be altered or different based on the kind of image we're presenting. And it just kind of kept expanding, because I was thinking about, and I mean, considering non-human subjects is always a kind of part of my work, although that can really vary in terms of subject. But I was thinking about, something a little bit more vulnerable or maybe a little more piercing emotionally would be the relationship we have with our domesticated companions, because we think of it as a very, committed, loving, like a relationship that is there reciprocated. And yet there is this kind of massive impasse in that we don't speak their language and we never will. So there's a lot of, again, trust in the feelings that we have or the connections that we think we have. So I don't know. I also found a Post-it that said domestic dog equals computer that I wrote years ago and thought, I don't know what this means, but maybe subconsciously I know what I'm doing. So yeah, that was kind of my start.
Yeah, maybe make an entire film about it. I wanted to ask you both, because I feel like both of your work here deals a little bit with the concept of the surface. And Jesse, I read a quote from you in speaking about this film where you said, I think surface gets a bad rap. So another idea of surface is that surface isn't just a doorway to what could be deeper, you said, but more like a skin, a vital interface for letting things in or keeping things out, or moderating constant adjustments to the environment. And so I was curious if you two could exchange a little bit about that, because Simon, in your work, I know that it's touching on also this concept of the superficial or toxic aspects of photography as well. And I was just really curious when I read this quote, Jesse, what you thought about that kind of surface interface connection.
I still believe that. I mean, I think that, we're so trained to think that there is this other level that is deeper, that is more serious, that is where truth lies or things like that. And it doesn't, I'm not trying to imply that there is nothing beyond the surface, but I feel like the surface is just treated as, again, this like membrane or this kind of doorway that we go through to access something else that's, the truth or the real thing or the inside. And I was kind of curious about trying to prioritize surface as the value of the surface as the site of encounter, the primary site of encounter, and maybe putting more pressure on that area. I mean, some of this came about with a course that I taught, which had to do a lot with examining kind of haptic experience and tactility as manifesting through digital technologies, which is something that I think we don't tend to think of as like haptic or tactile. And thinking, we read an article, which I don't remember all the pertinent information, but it was thinking about skin, just like our organ, which covers our entire body, and how we we think about it when it has pressure on it or when something happens to it. Or, and of course, we think about it in other political and ideological ways, but it's something that we also kind of take for granted, that my interior self is my real self. This is just the facade. And I guess I wanted to mess with that a bit or kind of probe at it, because I think we should maybe spend more time considering the surface as a really important place of encounter and not just something that we go through.
Simon, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, like, that sounds true. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I still think that like photography, we were wetter when we were children than we are now. Like, there's been like a slight change. So if you look at analog photography, it's kind of like the childhood of photography, and then kind of like digital image making now, what some people then call post-photographic moment or whatever. There's been a very big change in kind of like physicality of the thing, no? So we've gone from like messy chemistry and kind of getting a photographic itch from putting our hands into like to chemistry, to kind of like a whole other kind of like moment of standing. I can still remember the first time I touched an iPhone, and it was definitely, I mean, like, extremely physical, and actually kind of like almost I felt slightly embarrassed touching such a surface in public. It was extremely intimate and kind of erotic in some way. So yeah, I mean, like, I think totally interfaces are as important as ever, and they're just as material. Like our laptops get hot when we lie with them on our lap in our laps, etc., etc. But it's changed. No, the physicality and the interface has changed a lot, and that change means a lot for how we look at the world and how it feels to be people, kind of like navigating in life. And that, I guess, is what I'm interested in. But I think you are as well, Jesse. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, last question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. But Simon, I was really curious about, because I know a lot of your work deals with this concept of the photographic, just the relationship between that and this format that you chose, to kind of weird or distort of this like naturalistic, old-timey nature video. I was really curious about kind of like the construction of what is animal or what is not human and how that relates to the photographic.
I felt like that was almost two questions. Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That's very fair. Maybe you should first, you could tell us just about your practice in the photographic in general.
Or maybe I'll just start with the film and say like that it's Sounds the second part of a trilogy of videos, and they all deal with kind of anachronistic subject being or object beings. So the first one was about a car, a machine, obviously. The second one, this one, about an animal, and the third one about a poet. Like, this is of course really banal, but I'm kind of interested in that thing that seems to, no matter how much we speak about interspecies kind of like relationships, etc., there's still like this, like at the very core of our being, I think we still kind of like see ourselves as being more than the animal and different than the machine, and that's kind of like at the core of everything we do. Yeah. So the reason why I said that was because you asked about like the whole nature documentary kind of like vibe. So another thing I did in this trilogy was that the film about the car is then done in a kind of like commercial kind of style. It's basically a commercial that was never made for this car, but it's also like a structuralist film. And then this one, which is kind of like very flawed, and it's kind of half intentionally flawed and half just flawed. I guess it's kind of like tries to both be a nature documentary, like Animal Planet style, and then it tries to be like university, kind of like like university filmmaking, that kind of vibe, like really shitty grading and stuff like this. And then I thought I wanted to. I mean, I wanted to kind of like make a thing that didn't kind of round off and just like went off a tangent somehow. Like, yeah. That was one of the questions, I think. What was the other thing again?
Just the photographic, if you can weave it into our discussion.
Oh yeah. So I mean, like, so I'm trying. I don't know how this happened, but I guess I've been doing a lot of work over the years that I would refer to as being photographic. So a lot of kind of sculptures and stuff like this. And I kind of constantly encountered this problem that I thought it was very obvious, and many people who encountered it did not see it as being as obvious. So of course that's kind of like a good motor for kind of like driving that somehow like that visual argument on. So that has been like, let's say in the beginning, kind of like creating sculptures. I did a sculpture that involved a lot of objects that by nature are black and white, but then I kind of added some letter sleeves, and then they were black and white as well, and created this kind of very simple sensation of walking within a kind of like a black and white document, like because gallery spaces are also mostly black and white or grayscale at least. So these kind of things, and then now I'm trying to, but I'm embarrassed to say it out loud, but I'm trying to write a book, and it's funnily enough thinking about the whole animal technology kind of thing. Its title will maybe be A Dead Lion's Roar, and it comes from this quite famous I think YouTube clip where an American scientist is abducting or cutting open an entire lion in front of one of these anatomical theaters in front of a lot of American students, and everybody is sitting watching this, and they're very cheerful, and they all look like very healthy, and he's cutting it open, and then he's demonstrating how he can make it roar by reversing a vacuum cleaner and putting it onto it. It's quite out there, but so anyways, so I'm writing a book about the dead lion's roar, but in my case, the dead lion is photography. Yeah.
Thank you. Lots to think about there. Jeroen, can you maybe volunteer to bring around a mic to someone who wants to comment? Who's going to be the first question? Yeah.
So it's going to be a bit weird. You're going to hear a disembodied voice asking a question to you guys. So unless Eric wants to come up to the front, if you want to. Okay, we can do that too. Go stand around where Alorah stands. Maybe you can take her mic as well.
Oh yeah.
Hello? You see me now? Hey.
Yes.
Hey. Yeah, no, I was just wondering about you, Jesse, about your film. Like, it's not really a question. It's more like a comment, maybe, that why the dog or the animal comes to occupy this specific like, why would you use the dog here in order to talk? I'm not you, but what is it that makes us? Why does the dog become the figure here for representing absence or presence in relationship to the sound is missing when the dog? I mean, it's something similar to this. Also, I thought about this expression, the dog that didn't bark. I don't know if you know this expression. That's very often used in semiology to speak about absence as a sign. I'm just thinking, if this might have something to do with the absence of human language in the animal, that we somehow, the presence becomes like more tangible, but also absence, because the animal doesn't have the human language. I don't know if this is something, I mean, it's more a comment. I don't know what you would think about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm thankful for the comment. I think the dog, I mean, a lot of times when I'm beginning projects or when I'm thinking about them, phrases, words will be a kind of jumping off point. And so just that kind of maxim about the see a dog, hear a dog, I liked it as a phrase, as the kind of poetry of the phrase. I like that it wasn't attributed to anyone, although there've been some guesses. But using the dog and the dog as a subject, and I would say that's, I would agree that it is about a kind of absence and also a kind of desire, a sort of human desire that is really felt and strong and powerful for this to be, real, or for this kind of relationship with this animal to be as we want it to be, as we want it to be reciprocal, we want it to be loving, we want it to be all these things, and maybe it is, but we don't speak their language. We don't really know how they think, how their minds operate. I mean, everything that we know is lensed through our human experience. So there's always this barrier. And in some ways, it's not that I'm trying to acknowledge this barrier because the outcome is then sad and tragic. It's maybe going back to even the idea of the surface, like the barrier is an important part. It will always remain. And no matter how we want to pierce it at this stage, we'll never be able to get past it. So maybe we could incorporate it. I went a little bit on a tangent there, my apologies. But I think using domesticated animals in particular, because we have such intimate relationships with our dogs and our cats and the other animals we live with. I mean, they are in some ways, we feel like their parents or their caretakers. It's such a deep connection. And I felt like that introduced a kind of vulnerability to this question that wouldn't be there, I don't think, if it was just about me and my relationship to my computer. I think that there is a lot of kind of discussion and scholarship and just conversation about, social media and how we're online all the time and how things have changed. And, for better, for worse, these feel like important, relevant, and very familiar topics. But I feel like there's a level of vulnerability that goes in when you start to put it into terms that speak to something that is living, that's something that we have an emotional connection to. I don't know if that answers your question, but that was why the idea of the dog came from the sentence. And I am a dog lover and a dog fan. And so it was a pretty easy idea, but I did feel like it kind of exploded some of the arguments or some of the ideas maybe that I don't know if I'm necessarily making arguments. I'm more asking questions about, what happens if we acknowledge that this relationship that we want to be authentic or whatever that means or real is by some will always necessarily have an absence maybe or have a level of unknown that will essentially or is there forever. And I thought that will be more felt if I put that in concert with something that we feel more pressure and more preciousness about, which would be a relationship with a companion animal and definitely with another person. But there's something about the non-human presence of a domesticated animal that allows for different kinds of vulnerabilities and different kind of not liabilities, but I don't know, artistic agency maybe on my part.
Thanks, Jesse. Do we have another question or comment who can come up to ask? Jesse, what you just said about vulnerability reminded me of the MIT AI or robotics researcher Kate Darling, her book, A New Breed, about how kind of our historical relationships with animals have a lot to also do about the future of collaboration with AI and robotics. And I was just wondering if that vulnerability you're talking about also extends to sort of vulnerability and almost like an existential vulnerability of like loss of control of kind of the former position of the human. Did we get a second comment or question coming? Who wants to talk next?
Yeah. Hello. Yeah, it's because you talk about domestication and a lot about dogs actually, but in my vocabulary in daily, I actually personify animals a lot in my language, like, oh, it's adorable. And also I was a bit curious how you felt this, like, because they are pets, as you said, also they are in our environment, but we're personifying them a lot in our life, daily life. So I was wondering what you think about this, of this link of kind of domestication or humanification. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's super complex because I'm the same way. I mean, my dog is actually just like right over there, and my dog is basically my child. I mean, I'm not a parent but I have a dog, and the dog is like my, incredibly important part of my life, and I really value the relationship. I think there's something tricky though about, or at least it deserves to be thought about. I'm not weighing in on it because, here I am, I have a pet, I have a companion. I like to think that the dog is happy living with me and that she has a good life. But I mean, I don't, who knows? Maybe if she would rather be out in the nature, I don't think that would be good for her. But there is this kind of like, just sort of, the situation is unique in a way. I just finished I'm in the process of finishing a feature on plants, domesticated plants, houseplants. And it's another subject where there's a lot of different attitudes. There's people who, they talk to their plants, they talk about their plants being happy, and other people, it's a business or they're an aesthetic object. So it's another area where our relationship as a human to a non-human is something I want to investigate or think about. I don't want to land on a position of like it's good or it's bad. I think it's more just worth thinking about. And that's, most of my work has been dedicated to that. What does it mean to be human and have relationships, meaningful relationships, and form intimacies and, connect with non-human things, non-human animals, non-human objects. These are all, or, this is what I'm sort of dedicating my life to thinking about.
Well, it actually brought me to a second question, if I maybe can. Yeah, it's like, you talk about domestication, and maybe for both of you, like, because it was a wild animal and pets, and we were wild animals at one point in our evolution, and we got domesticated. Actually, somehow we got a certain discipline, I feel like, of living in in civil, like making cities and then developing, having pets and stuff like this. So like, will they maybe follow the same evolution? Actually, is it like something possible that we're just not right now, but yeah, maybe in a certain time, if we give it time, and technology maybe can translate this for us. I don't know.
I was just listening to something and it made me want to read an essay by John Berger called Why Look at Animals? And a lot of it, I think, or at least what I was listening to, because I need to revisit this, was thinking about how we feel this kind of lack of animal presence in our lives because we, for so many thousands of years, animals have kind of become visible when we want them to be and invisible when we don't. And so but there used to be a way when we thought of them even more as peers because we encountered them out in, kind of pre-agricultural times. So I found that really interesting. And there's a part of it that resonated with me, that I feel a lack of animal presence in my life. Not that I want to start living off the land with nothing, because I would be dead very quickly if that happened. But there's sort of like an existential hole because we don't have this relationship with animals that we used to at one point. I don't know.
That's true. Thanks so much. Do you have one more question or comment from the audience, maybe? Great. Florian.
And Jesse, and you hear me? Yeah. And Simon, yeah. Thanks a lot, and really great that you both can join us. And I'm a big admirer of both of your films, how they are refined and the spaces they open through methods of montage and then creating lots of association. Maybe a last question, Simon, because I remember, or I not fully remember, a text you've written about Comoros. And there's something about those water drops in digital photography. And I think that could expand also, or add to what you've said about the film. Can you just help me what I miss out of your text? And you said there's a special problematic with it to create them or so. What was that with the water drops in digital photography on surfaces? Or I'm making up something?
No. You're not making up something, but I think the text you're referring to is a kind of trippy press text I wrote once. And it's difficult to quote from because it's trying to be like literature, I guess. That's something. but I think that yeah, I mean, like I think that in that text I kind of come to the conclusion somehow that the digital world is a place where things don't get soaked and where matter doesn't spill over from one thing to the other, etc., etc. And that's of course kind of like what I'm then doing in this little video, when you then have like porous materials with kind of like perfect droplets sitting on top of them. And I guess it comes from like, I feel like I'm almost a bit embarrassed now because I feel like that's last a few years back, but like, like when in the video also you have like all these screensavers that were very popular at a point where you have photographs of water droplets sitting on things. And there's something about that image that seems like really as if it that seems really important. And it's not because, I mean, water droplets on leaves also existed in black and white analog photography, but somehow it seems like now those droplets are most probably not even real. No, I mean, like they're just like images of water. Anyways, I guess, I mean, I think that the image of water kind of like or fluids kind of like weaves through photographic history. It seems like extremely kind of important. Yeah, and I don't know what to say about it. I mean, like Jesse spoke earlier about the interfaces and so on, and you could say that like there was a point where before kind of before we all had computers, where we would like flip through magazines with images on them. Like I'm here referring to my own youth. So kind of like whatever, you'd have like pop culture magazines and so on, and they would be like those pages, like the kind of like the way they smelled, the way they were sticky and stuff like this is something that I remember very, very clearly, And those materials, of course, were kind of like porous materials. Whereas now I jumped into the ocean a couple of times last summer, forgetting that I had my iPhone in my pocket, and it was no problem. You know, like there's no consequences anymore. It's like, yeah.
There are the sticky fingers on the touch screen, no? So I mean, how the both of you transcend screensavers, touch screens is so amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're at time, but Simon, I was also just curious. I think it was in the same text that Florian was talking about. You had made this point about how certain people were framing the cormorant's kind of wet feathers or soaked feathers as this kind of error or primitive feature, when in fact it could also be some kind of evolutionary intelligence. Is that part of the photographic at all, like the kind of human tendency of framing things in the wrong way?
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, like I kind of think that any kind of arguments that I don't know, I guess it depends on where you come from, but I guess I come kind of like from a background that is not out of the natural sciences and so on, and I have like a very natural instinct to kind of like protest any kind of arguments that say that things happen because they have to, because of natural evolution or whatever, and I think that yeah, for me it's just funny. I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean, like, I don't know why the cormorant has wet feathers. How would we ever know? I mean, like, maybe it is a mistake and it learned to live with it and it kind of like turned it into its own favor, or maybe it's like maybe it is really smart. I mean, the story. So the argument between these sciences is that it gets really wet so that it gets heavy, so that it can dive really fast and get more fish than the other birds, I guess, or something like this. For me, I don't know. I won't take sides in that. I'm not even that interested in it, but I think the arguments are quite interesting, funny. Oh.
Well, thank you so much. I super appreciate it. We're over time, but so glad that you could join us, and thanks for phoning in today.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Bye.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nice to meet you, Jeff.
Nice to meet you too. Bye.
Thank you, Alorah.